What's something about your culture nobody knows? I'm from a small village where women who lie lose their tongues. I watched it happen to 3 women in my family before they came for me. No trial, no mercy, just the elder's son holding your arms down while his father held up his hot iron blade. My mother said it kept us pure, but really it just kept us terrified. Speaking never felt safe. Even if you were sure you were telling the truth, nothing could stop someone from accusing you of lying. My brothers would taunt me, threatening to tell my parents I'd told a lie if I didn't do their chores for them. To them, it was a joke. To me, it was a living nightmare. Every time I went to the marketplace, I saw tongueless women begging wordlessly for coins and getting dirt kicked in their faces. I would do anything to make sure I didn't become one of them. My sister lost her tongue when she was 15. This married man had been following her around, and when his wife asked if my sister had encouraged him, my sister said no. The guy admitted everything the next day, but somehow that made her the liar for denying it. They did it in our kitchen while I hid under the stairs. The sounds still wake me up sometimes. After that, my sister couldn't eat solid food for months. She tried writing notes, but nobody wanted to read words from a liar. No man would marry her now. She joined the other tongueless women who haunted our market, pointing at things they needed, depending on their kids to guess what they wanted. Walking reminders of what happened when women forgot their place. Fear ran our whole lives. My cousin started stuttering because she'd check every word 3 times before saying it. My friend just stopped talking, pretending to be mute. Safer that way. When I turned 17, I worked at my uncle's fruit stand weighing rice for customers. The mayor's wife bought her usual 2 kilograms one day, but this time she came back hours later saying I'd shorted her. I knew I'd given her the right amount because I always measured twice, but it didn't matter. She was Haram Rais al-Baladia, and I was nobody. The elders came for me that afternoon. They searched me and found nothing, but she insisted I'd hidden the rice that I stole. Her word against mine wasn't even a contest. By sunset, they announced I'd face judgment at dawn. My mother didn't ask if I was innocent because it didn't matter. Someone important had made an accusation. That night, Mom sat on my bed teaching me how to live without a tongue, which foods to avoid so I wouldn't choke, how to breathe through the pain when it happened. In the kitchen, I could hear them preparing the blade. The rasp of metal on stone and the heating of the fire went on for hours. I thought about running. The door was right there and the port city was only 2 days away. But leaving meant abandoning everything and hoping I don't die in the desert heat without water for 2 days minimum. Staying meant losing my voice forever. I lay there trying to decide what to do while they sharpened the blade. Dawn came fast. The elders arrived with the mayor, all of them looking satisfied that justice would be served. The Haram Rais al-Baladia sat in our best chair like she was watching a show. My uncle held my arms even though he'd known me since birth, knowing I'd never stolen. That's how it worked here. They forced me to my knees in the same spot where my sister had knelt. The elder's son grabbed my face, fingers digging into my jaw to force my mouth open. I could smell the alcohol on his breath, see the excitement in his eyes. He enjoyed this. He started dipping the blade into the fire, and my life flashed before my eyes. I would never speak again. I closed my eyes, preparing for searing pain, when suddenly, "Wait!" someone shouted from the doorway. My sister stood there holding a piece of paper, her scarred mouth set in a hard line. She couldn't speak, but she'd written something. The elder took the paper and his face went dark as he read it. He looked at the mayor's wife, then at the mayor. She claims she saw Haram Rais al-Baladia at the market yesterday. Says she saw her take extra rice when she thought no one was looking. The mayor stepped forward, his face turning red. "My wife is no thief." He looked at my sister with cold eyes. "But you already lost your tongue for lying, and your sister is about to lose hers." The elder nodded slowly. "The tongueless woman writes lies to protect her sister. This changes nothing." He turned to his son. "Continue." The hot blade was taken out of the fire, and just when the elder's son was about to press it against my tongue, the mayor grabbed his arm. "No," he pointed at my sister. "If she spreads these lies about my wife, even in writing, it must be punished." His smile made my blood freeze. "We must take more than just the younger one's tongue. The silent one still has hands to write lies with." The elder considered this while my sister's face drained of color. "Yes," he decided. "Both of them. The tongue and the hands. Let's finish what we started with this family of liars." Requested Reads is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. The elder's son tightens his grip on my jaw while his father raises the heated blade toward my open mouth. And in that frozen moment, I see my sister launch herself forward with a strength I didn't know she still possessed. She crashes into the elder's son with her full body weight, and the blade flies from his father's hand, clattering to the floor where it burns a black mark into the wood. The elder's son stumbles backward and his fingers slip from my face. The room explodes into shouting. The mayor jumps from his chair. The elder scrambles for the fallen blade. My uncle's hands loosen on my arms just enough for me to wrench myself sideways, and I scramble away from the kneeling spot where my sister bled years ago. My mother stands near the doorway but doesn't move to block our path, instead turning her face away as if she can't bear to watch what happens next. Her hands grip the doorframe, but she steps aside. My sister grabs my wrist with her scarred hands and yanks me toward the door while the elder's son struggles to his feet, his face twisted with rage. The mayor stands up from his chair shouting orders, but we're already moving, our bare feet slapping against the floor as we run. The elder yells something behind us, but I don't look back. My sister's grip on my wrist is so tight it hurts, but I don't care. We burst through the front door into the late afternoon heat and sprint down the dusty street while voices erupt behind us. Neighbors peek through windows and doorways but quickly retreat inside, closing shutters and doors as if they never saw us pass. No one will help us. No one ever helps. The sun beats down on my head and the packed dirt street burns my bare feet, but I keep running. My sister pulls me into a narrow alley between two houses, and we cut through someone's back lot where laundry hangs drying in the sun. I lose my left sandal when it catches on a rock and sharp stones cut into my bare foot, but I don't slow down because I can hear men's voices getting closer. Blood from my foot leaves marks in the dust. My sister drags me around a corner and through a gap in a fence. We squeeze between two buildings so narrow our shoulders scrape the walls. The men's voices grow louder. They're searching the streets. They're calling for others to help look. We duck into an abandoned storage shed at the edge of the village, pressing ourselves against the far wall in the dim light that filters through gaps in the wooden slats. My sister clamps her hand over my mouth even though I'm trying not to make a sound, and we hold completely still as heavy footsteps pass by outside. I can hear the elder's son cursing as he searches. Someone else is with him, maybe 2 or 3 men. They're checking every building, every hiding spot. The footsteps stop right outside our shed. I close my eyes and pray they don't look inside. My sister's hand presses harder against my mouth. Her other hand grips my shoulder. We don't breathe. After what feels like forever, the footsteps move away. After the footsteps fade, my sister releases me and pulls out a small pencil stub and scrap of paper she keeps in her pocket. She writes quickly and shows me the note. Desert or Blade? Choose now. Her scarred mouth is set in a grim line as she watches me read. I nod and whisper that we should wait until dusk when it's cooler and we can move with less chance of being spotted. My sister writes again. Highway, truck stop, 2 hours walk after dark. She's already thinking ahead while I'm still shaking from how close that blade came to my tongue. She knows the routes because she used to walk to the market before they took her tongue. She knows which paths avoid the main roads. We check our pockets and find almost nothing useful. I have a thin silver bracelet my grandmother gave me that might be worth something for trade or bribe. My sister has her pencil and paper, and the clothes on our backs are all we own now since we can never go home again. My foot throbs where the stones cut it. Blood has soaked through my remaining sandal. My sister examines the cuts and frowns. The afternoon drags on while we take turns sleeping in short shifts, our bodies cramping in the small space. My sister tears a strip from her sleeve and wraps my bleeding foot, her movements gentle despite her own pain from old scars that never healed right. The fabric helps stop the bleeding, but walking is going to hurt. Outside the shed, I can hear the village sounds continuing. People going about their day. Children playing, dogs barking, life moving forward like nothing happened. Like 2 women didn't just escape their own mutilation. The heat makes the shed feel like an oven. Sweat runs down my back and my throat is so dry it hurts to swallow. My sister hands me a small piece of hard bread she had hidden in her pocket. It's stale and dusty, but I eat it anyway. She takes a tiny bite herself, then puts the rest away. We'll need food for the walk. The sun moves across the sky slowly. Every sound outside makes us freeze. Every voice that passes makes my heart race. But no one opens the shed door. No one finds us. As the light begins to fade through the slats, my sister writes out our plan on a new piece of paper. Stay off main road. Use back paths toward highway. Approach truck drivers at rest stop. Offer bracelet for ride to anywhere with city. It's not much of a plan, but it's all we have. We wait inside the shed until the light through the wooden slats turns orange and purple, and my sister pulls out her pencil again to write down what we need to do. Her handwriting is shaky but clear. Stay off the main road. Use the back paths toward the highway. Approach truck drivers at the rest stop. Offer my bracelet for a ride to anywhere with a city. She underlines the word anywhere twice, and I nod because I understand that anywhere is better than here. It's not much of a plan, but it's all we have. And when the sky gets dark enough that we can move without being easily spotted, we slip out of the shed into the warm evening air. The village is settling in for the night, and we can hear families inside their homes eating dinner and talking. We move along the edges of properties, staying close to walls and fences, and every time a dog barks, my whole body goes stiff. My sister grabs my arm and we freeze against someone's back wall until the barking stops. Then we keep moving toward the edge of the village where the houses spread out and the desert starts. A man's voice calls out somewhere behind us, and we drop behind a pile of old wood and wait with our hands pressed over our mouths. The voice gets closer, then fades away in a different direction, and we stay hidden for another few minutes before moving again. My foot throbs where the cuts are and blood has soaked through the cloth my sister wrapped around it, but I don't say anything because we can't stop now. We can hear the highway in the distance, a low hum of trucks and cars that sounds like freedom, and we walk toward that sound as fast as we can manage. The walk takes way longer than 2 hours because we have to hide when we see headlights coming across the desert. The first time, we throw ourselves into a ditch and press our bodies flat against the rocky ground while a truck drives past on a dirt road. My sister's breathing sounds rough and painful, and I remember all the damage they did to her mouth and throat 5 years ago. The second time we hide, we crouch behind a big rock formation while two vehicles pass by, and I'm scared they're men from the village searching for us. My foot feels like it's on fire with each step, and my sister is limping too from old injuries that never healed right, but neither of us suggests stopping or going back. We finally reach the truck stop around midnight, and it's just a small paved area where big trucks pull off the highway to rest. The smell of diesel fuel hangs thick in the air, and we can see maybe 6 or 7 large trucks parked with their engines running. Some drivers are sleeping in their cabs and others are standing outside smoking or checking their cargo. My sister and I stay in the shadows at the edge of the paved area, and she pulls out her pencil to write another note. The paper is crumpled and dirty, but I can read what she writes. You talk. I watch. Show bracelet. Say city only. She positions herself where she can see my face and also see any driver I approach, and I know she's ready to pull me away if anything feels wrong. I take off my grandmother's thin silver bracelet and hold it in my shaking hand. Then I walk toward a driver who's checking the tires on his truck. He's older than my father would be, with gray hair and a face that looks kind instead of mean. I walk up to him and hold out the bracelet, and my voice comes out quiet and scared. Please, sir, we need a ride to the city. This is all I have to pay you. The driver looks at my bloody foot first, then at my sister standing in the shadows with her scarred mouth, and something changes in his face. He asks in a low voice if we're running from family or from the law, and I answer honestly that we're running from both because they're the same thing in our village. He stares at us for a long moment, and I'm scared he's going to tell us to leave or call someone, but instead he tells us his name is Tunde Rivers. He says he lost a niece 5 years ago to a village custom like ours, but in a different region, and he couldn't save her because he lived too far away and found out too late. His voice sounds sad and angry at the same time. Tunde waves away my bracelet and tells me to keep it. Then he says we can ride hidden under the tarp in his truck bed with his produce, but we have to stay completely quiet if he gets stopped at any checkpoint. He warns us that if officials find us, he'll have to pretend he didn't know we were there, and we both nod because we understand. We climb into the back of his truck, and Tunde helps us burrow under a heavy canvas tarp that covers crates of melons and vegetables. The space is tight and dark and smells like dirt and diesel fuel, but it feels safer than anything has felt in days. We arrange ourselves between the crates so we won't roll around when the truck moves, and Tunde secures the tarp over us before walking back to the driver's cab. A minute later, the truck's engine gets louder and we start moving, pulling out of the truck stop and onto the highway. I feel every bump and turn in my stomach as we drive away from the only home I've ever known, away from the kitchen where they were going to cut out my tongue and cut off my sister's hands. My sister finds my hand in the darkness under the tarp and squeezes it 3 times, which is our childhood signal that means, I'm here with you. And I squeeze back 3 times to tell her the same thing. An hour passes in that cramped darkness and my legs start going numb from staying in the same position. The truck's engine has a steady rhythm that almost makes me drowsy despite my fear, but then I feel us slowing down and hear voices outside. My sister's hand tightens around mine as the truck comes to a complete stop. Through the gaps in the tarp, I can see bright lights and male voices are talking about checking cargo and seeing papers. Tunde's voice answers them, calm and friendly like he's chatting with neighbors about nothing important. He talks about the weather getting hotter and how the roads have more potholes this year, and one of the officials laughs at something Tunde says about his truck's bad suspension. My sister and I stay frozen under the tarp, barely breathing, while footsteps walk around the truck bed. Someone pats the canvas right above my head, and I feel my whole body go stiff with terror. But then the footsteps move away and I hear Tunde still talking about road conditions and delivery schedules. After what feels like forever but is probably only a few minutes, the truck's engine gets louder again and we start moving forward. My sister lets out a long, slow breath and I realize I've been holding mine too. We drive for hours more and my body aches from the cramped space between the crates. The smell of melons and diesel makes my stomach turn, and my cut foot throbs with every bump in the road. Somewhere in the middle of the night, the truck slows again and pulls off the highway. Through a gap in the tarp, I see bright lights and gas pumps, and Tunde gets out to fill the tank. I watch people moving around the gas station, mostly truck drivers like Tunde, and then I see a man standing near the building entrance. He's wearing the same kind of long shirt that men from our village wear, and something about the way he stands makes my blood go cold. I've seen him before at the marketplace talking to the elder son. My sister sees him too, and her whole body goes tense next to mine. Tunde must notice something wrong because he finishes pumping gas faster than normal and climbs back into the cab. Instead of getting back on the highway we came from, the truck turns onto a different road. Through the tarp gap, I see a sign pointing to a longer route that goes around the mountains instead of through them. The detour will add time to our trip, but I'm grateful that Tunde saw the danger and changed course. The cramped position is making my sister's old scars hurt worse. I can feel her hands shaking next to mine, and I know the scar tissue in her mouth must be bothering her too from all the stress. I remember how our mother used to massage her fingers after the blade took her tongue, gentle circles on each finger to help with the pain. I start doing the same thing now, working my thumbs across her palms and fingers the way Mom taught me. My sister's breathing is fast and shallow at first, but after a few minutes it starts to even out. She squeezes my hand once to say thank you, and I squeeze back. We've been taking care of each other like this since we were kids, finding ways to comfort each other when our parents couldn't or wouldn't. During a quiet stretch of highway when there are no other vehicles around, Tunde's voice comes through the gap in the tarp. He tells us about his niece who lived in a different village with customs similar to ours. She was only 14 when the village elders came for her because someone accused her of lying about something small and stupid. Tunde's voice breaks when he describes how he lived too far away and didn't hear about what happened until it was already over. He couldn't save her because by the time he arrived, she'd already lost her tongue, and the village elders said the matter was closed. His niece died 2 years later from an infection that started in her mouth and spread. Tunde says he spent the last 3 years driving routes that take him past villages like ours, hoping he'd get a chance to help someone escape the way he couldn't help his niece. I want to tell him thank you, but my throat is too tight to speak, so I just press my hand against the tarp where his voice is coming from. The sky starts getting lighter and I can see the darkness under the tarp turning gray. We're moving through streets now instead of open highway, and through the gaps I see real buildings, tall ones made of concrete and glass instead of mud, brick, and wood. There are streetlights everywhere and paved roads without potholes and more cars than I've ever seen in one place. The truck slows and turns into a parking area next to a huge building with a red cross symbol on it. Tunde pulls into a spot and turns off the engine. Then he comes around to the back and lifts the tarp. The morning light makes me squint after so many hours in darkness. Tunde helps us climb down from the truck bed and my legs almost give out when I try to stand. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out some folded bills, pressing them into my hand. He points at the building and says the emergency room doctors here have to help everyone who comes in, no matter who they are or where they're from. He tells us to get our injuries treated and then figure out what to do next. Before I can thank him properly, he's already climbing back into his truck cab, and I watch him drive away, knowing he risked a lot to help 2 strangers. The hospital building is bigger than any structure I've ever been inside. My sister and I walk through automatic doors that slide open by themselves, and the emergency room is overwhelming with its bright fluorescent lights and busy staff in colored uniforms. There are people everywhere, some bleeding or crying, others just sitting in plastic chairs waiting. A woman at a desk asks what we need, and I show her my bloody foot and gesture at my sister. She types something into a computer and tells us to sit down, that someone will see us soon. We wait for maybe 20 minutes before a nurse calls my name and takes us to a small examination room with a bed covered in paper. A doctor comes in a few minutes later, a man who introduces himself as Wei Howard. He's younger than I expected a doctor to be, with kind eyes and careful hands. Wei treats my infected foot first, cleaning it with stuff that stings and wrapping it in proper bandages. Then he asks my sister if he can examine her scars, and she nods. Wei looks at her mouth with a small light, taking photos with a camera and writing detailed notes on a computer. He measures the scar tissue and documents everything he sees, his face serious but not disgusted like some people get when they see her. Wei asks gentle questions about what happened to us. His voice is soft and he doesn't rush us to answer. When I hesitate because I'm scared of what might happen if we tell the truth, Wei explains that he's seen cases like ours before. He says he works with people who've been hurt by their families or communities, and he knows how to document injuries in ways that can help later. He suggests we might want to make an official report to the police or social services. The idea makes my stomach drop because reporting means the village elders might find out where we are. I tell Wei, I'm scared that making a report will bring them here to finish what they started. Wei nods like he understands and says he'll note everything in our medical file either way, and that we can decide later if we want to use it for anything legal. A woman knocks on the examination room door and introduces herself as a hospital social worker. She explains that she works with a legal aid organization that helps people in situations like ours. She asks if it's okay to call someone who might be able to help, and when I nod, she takes out her phone and pages someone named Vivian Rashid. The social worker stays with us while we wait, asking basic questions about whether we have a place to stay or any family who can help. I tell her we have nowhere to go and no one to call. Within an hour, there's another knock on the door and a woman walks in carrying a worn briefcase. She has short gray hair and a serious expression that somehow feels kind instead of scary. She introduces herself as Vivian and shakes both our hands like we're important people instead of desperate runaways. Vivian pulls up a chair and sits down at our level instead of standing over us. She asks us to tell her what happened, and something about the way she asks makes me feel like she actually wants to hear the truth, instead of just going through motions. I start talking, and once I begin, I can't stop. I tell her about the mayor's wife and the false accusation, about the elder and his son with their heated blade, about my sister trying to protect me and how they decided to take both my tongue and her hands. Vivian listens without interrupting, and she doesn't flinch or look away when my sister shows her scarred mouth, or when I describe the blade being heated in our kitchen fire. When I finish talking, Vivian explains our options in clear, simple language. She says we can file for protection orders that would legally prohibit certain people from coming near us. We can press criminal charges if we want to, or we can just access shelter services while we figure out our next steps. She makes it clear that all of these choices are ours to make, that she's here to help with whatever we decide. My sister pulls out her pencil and paper and starts writing. She writes for a long time, filling both sides of the paper with her small, neat handwriting. She writes about what happened to her 5 years ago when that married man followed her around and his wife asked if she'd encouraged him. She writes about saying no and being called a liar even after the man admitted everything. She writes about the kitchen and the blade and the months of not being able to eat solid food. She writes about being treated like she was worthless because she couldn't speak anymore. When she finishes, Vivian reads everything carefully and then asks if she can keep the statement. My sister nods. Then Vivian turns to me and asks if I'm willing to give a recorded testimony about what almost happened to us. She explains that the recording will be kept private unless we decide later to use it for legal purposes. I agree, and Vivian takes out a small recording device. I talk into it for maybe 15 minutes, describing everything from the moment the mayor's wife accused me of stealing rice to the moment we escaped. My voice shakes when I describe the elder son holding my jaw open and the blade coming toward my mouth, but I get through it. When I finish, Vivian stops the recording and tells us this is the first time anyone has created an official paper trail that proves what happened. She says that matters more than we might realize right now. The next morning, Vivian drives us to the central police station in her small gray car that smells like coffee and paper. My sister sits in the back seat writing notes on her pad while I watch the city streets pass by. Still not used to how many people live here compared to our village. The police station is a concrete building with metal detectors at the entrance and officers in dark blue uniforms standing around looking bored. Vivian leads us to a desk where a tired-looking officer takes our names and tells us to wait. We sit on hard plastic chairs for almost an hour before another officer calls us into a small room with a table and recording equipment. The officer asks basic questions about where we're from and what happened, but he keeps frowning like our answers don't make sense to him. He calls in a translator even though we tell him we speak the language fine, and the translator sits there looking uncomfortable while we repeat everything we already said. The whole process feels wrong, like they're trying to make our story fit into forms and categories that don't match what actually happened to us. Vivian stays calm and professional, helping us clarify details when the officers seem confused about village customs and elder authority structures. My sister writes out additional information about the blade and the kitchen, and how many women in our village lost their tongues, and the officers take photos of her notes for their file. After 2 hours of questions and paperwork, the main officer tells us he'll need to contact the local station near our village to verify our claims. Vivian's expression doesn't change, but I see her jaw tighten slightly. We leave the station and sit in her car while she makes phone calls to someone she calls a provincial contact. An hour later, Wei shows up at the station carrying a thick folder of medical records. He walks into the building with confident steps, and I wonder if doctors just naturally look like they belong everywhere. Through the station windows, I can see him talking with the officers and laying out papers on their desk. He points to documents and photos, his hands moving precisely as he explains something. The officers lean forward to look at the evidence he's brought. Wei stays in there for 30 minutes, and when he comes out, he nods at Vivian through the car window. Vivian goes back inside and returns 20 minutes later looking frustrated. She starts the car and drives us to a coffee shop 3 blocks away. Inside the coffee shop, Vivian orders us tea and sits down heavily in her chair. She explains that the local police station near our village told the city officers this is a domestic tradition matter outside legal authority. The village officer said these customs have existed for generations, and that outsiders shouldn't interfere with local practices. Vivian pulls out her phone and starts making calls right there at the coffee shop table. She talks to someone named Hassan about provincial jurisdiction and cultural practice laws. She calls another person about human rights violations and federal oversight. She calls a third person asking about precedent cases. My sister and I sit quietly drinking our tea while Vivian works through her contact list with sharp, focused energy. By the time the sun starts setting, Vivian has connected with a prosecutor at the provincial level who apparently has been trying to build cases against villages that practice these brutal customs. She explains to us that this changes our strategy completely. Instead of going through local police who dismiss these cases, we'll work with provincial authorities who have broader power and less connection to village politics. It will take longer, she warns us, maybe weeks or months instead of days, but it has a much better chance of actual legal consequences for the elder and the mayor. The next afternoon, a woman named Ren calls Vivian's office while we're there organizing paperwork. Ren introduces herself as a reporter working on a story about traditional practices and modern law. My first reaction is absolute panic because media attention feels dangerous, like putting a target on our backs for anyone from the village to find us. Vivian asks Ren careful questions about her story angle and editorial standards. Ren explains she wants to focus on the policy gaps and legal frameworks, rather than personal trauma details. She promises complete anonymity with altered voices in any recordings and no identifying information about our specific village or situation. Vivian looks at us and asks what we think. My sister writes quickly that media coverage might help other women, and I realize she's probably right even though it scares me. We agree to meet with Ren under strict conditions that Vivian negotiates over the phone. 2 days later, Ren comes to Vivian's office with a small recording device and a notebook. She's younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with short hair and tired eyes. She asks us questions about the legal process and what barriers we faced, not about the blade or the kitchen or the specific terror we felt. She asks about village power structures and how women's voices get silenced in these systems. The interview lasts an hour, and Ren keeps her word about focusing on policy rather than pain. When the article runs in a regional newspaper 3 days later, I read it twice, feeling exposed and validated at the same time. Ren wrote about how national laws prohibit mutilation and violence, but local enforcement often dismisses these cases as cultural matters. She interviewed legal experts about jurisdiction problems and discussed our case only as one anonymous example among several. Our specific details are changed enough that I don't think anyone from the village would recognize us, but the truth of what happened is still there in the facts she presents. The article generates immediate responses. Vivian shows us emails from people donating money to the legal aid fund that's helping with our case. Some donations are small, maybe 10 or 20 currency units. Others are larger. People write messages saying they want to help women escaping these situations. But Vivian also mentions, without showing us, that the news outlet received threatening messages from people defending traditional practices and calling the article an attack on cultural values. We know both reactions exist in the world. The morning after the article publishes, my phone rings from a number I don't recognize. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. My mother's voice comes through tight with fear. She tells me the mayor is furious about the article even though it didn't name him specifically. She says the village is in an uproar with people arguing about whether the old customs should continue. She warns us never to try coming back because it's not safe. Then her voice drops to a whisper, and she says she's proud we got away, that she should have helped us escape years ago. The call ends abruptly like someone walked into the room. 2 hours later, Vivian's office phone rings and it's my mother again, this time calling from a different number. She tells Vivian she's sending something important. Minutes later, Vivian's phone buzzes with an incoming photo message. The image shows our kitchen with the blade being heated in the fire, and there's a timestamp visible on a wall clock showing it's from the night we escaped. My mother took this photo secretly while they were preparing to take my tongue and my sister's hands. The premeditation is right there in the image, the careful preparation, the heated blade ready hours before dawn. My mother's act of sending this evidence feels like her own quiet rebellion against everything she was taught to accept. Vivian immediately opens her laptop and starts drafting emergency protective order applications. She works through the afternoon pulling together the photo evidence my mother sent, weighs detailed medical reports about our injuries, and our sworn statements from the police station. She explains that these orders will legally prohibit the elder, his son, and the mayor from coming within a certain distance of us, or contacting us in any way. The orders will be registered at both provincial and local levels. Enforcement in the village itself will be complicated, she admits, since the local police already dismissed our case once, but having the orders on record creates legal consequences if they're violated. She files the applications electronically and tells us we should hear back within 48 hours about whether a judge will grant them. That evening, Vivian's phone rings while we're eating dinner at the shelter. She steps into the hallway to answer, and I can hear her voice go tight even through the closed door. When she comes back and her face looks worried and she sits down across from us. Men showed up at Tunde's truck yard asking questions about his routes and what cargo he carried last week. They wanted to know if he picked up any passengers and where he dropped them off. Tunde told them he only hauls produce, but they kept pushing, and one of them took photos of his trucks and wrote down his license plate numbers. He called Vivian right after they left because he's scared they'll come back or follow him or hurt his family for helping us. His voice shook on the phone when he told her he might need to step back from our case because he can't risk his wife and kids getting targeted. I feel sick hearing this because Tunde saved our lives, and now he's in danger because of us. My sister writes on her notepad asking if he's okay, and if we should do something to protect him. Vivian makes another call right there from the shelter dining room and talks to Tunde for almost 20 minutes. She tells him she doesn't need him to testify in person at any hearing or trial. An anonymous written statement describing the night he picked us up will be enough for the court record. He just needs to write down what happened, sign it, and mail it to her office without his return address on the envelope. No one will know his name or where he lives, and he won't have to appear anywhere publicly. Tunde agrees to send the statement, and Vivian promises to keep his identity protected in all the legal paperwork. After she hangs up, I tell her I feel terrible that someone who helped us is now getting threatened. She says this is what happens when powerful people feel cornered, but that we can't let fear stop us from seeking justice. The next morning, I wake up to voices in the shelter hallway and the sound of staff members moving quickly past our door. My sister and I get dressed and find the shelter director talking to 2 staff members near the front entrance. They noticed men standing across the street about an hour ago, just watching the building. The men aren't doing anything illegal, just standing there on the sidewalk smoking and looking at everyone who goes in or out. The shelter staff already called the police who showed up and questioned the men, but couldn't arrest them for standing on a public street. The police told the men to move along, but they just walked to the corner and kept watching from there instead. The shelter director tells us we need to pack our things because Vivian is arranging an emergency move to a different location with better security. We go back to our room and stuff our donated clothes and toiletries into plastic bags since we don't have real luggage. Everything we own fits in 2 grocery bags, and that makes me feel small and powerless. We're supposed to be safe here, but we're still running, still hiding, still looking over our shoulders. A van with tinted windows pulls up to the shelter's back entrance an hour later, and we climb in with our bags. The driver takes a long route through the city, making several turns and doubling back to make sure no one follows us. The new shelter is in a different neighborhood with a locked gate and security cameras. We have to show ID to get in, and visitors need appointments scheduled in advance. Our room is smaller than the last one, but it has a lock that works and bars on the windows. My sister and I unpack our few things and sit on the beds not talking because there's nothing to say. We thought we escaped when we left the village, but the fear followed us here. That night, I fall asleep quickly because I'm exhausted, but the nightmares start around 2 in the morning. I'm back in our kitchen, and the elder son has my jaw in his hands. I can smell the alcohol on his breath and see the heated blade coming toward my mouth. I try to scream, but no sound comes out, and I wake up gasping with my jaw clenched so tight it aches. My sister is awake too, sitting up in her bed watching me with worried eyes. This happens every night for the next week. I'm scared to fall asleep because I know the nightmare is waiting. Wei calls to check on us, and I tell him about the dreams. He says it's a normal response to trauma and gives me the number for a counseling group that meets at the hospital twice a week. The group is for people who've experienced violence, and they have therapists who understand what we're going through. I write down the information, but I'm not sure I'm ready to talk about it with strangers. Ren's second article comes out 3 days after we moved to the new shelter. This one is different from the first because it focuses on laws and policies instead of personal stories. She interviewed lawyers and professors about how traditional village customs conflict with national laws that protect people from violence. The article talks about the gap between what's legal on paper and what actually happens in small communities where elders have more power than police. She mentions our case only briefly as one example among many, and she doesn't use any details that could identify us. Reading it feels less scary than the first article because it's about systems and rules, not about me and my sister specifically. The article seems to change the conversation online from people arguing about whether our story is real to people debating what the government should do about villages that still practice these customs. A woman from a provincial organization calls Vivian's office the next day. The group works on women's rights issues, and they want to help with our case. They've been documenting similar situations for years, and they have files on at least a dozen other cases from nearby villages. Women who lost their tongues for supposed lying, women who lost fingers or hands, women who were beaten or burned for breaking traditional rules. The organization sends over thick folders of statements and photos and medical records that show this isn't just about our village. It's a pattern that happens in multiple places, and the legal system has mostly ignored it. Vivian meets with the organization's lawyers, and they agree to work together on our case. Having more evidence and more legal help makes everything feel more real and more serious. 5 days after we escaped from our village, Vivian drives us to the provincial courthouse for our hearing. The building is huge with marble floors and high ceilings that make every sound echo. We pass through metal detectors and security guards check our bags. The courtroom is on the 3rd floor, and it's bigger than any room I've ever been in. Rows of wooden benches face a raised platform where the judge sits, and there are tables for lawyers and a separate area for witnesses. Everything feels formal and confusing with procedures I don't understand. The mayor's lawyer stands up as soon as we enter and immediately asks the judge to dismiss our case. He argues that since the defendants haven't appeared in court, and since everything happened in the village under traditional customs, the provincial court has no authority to issue orders. Vivian stands up and responds that the defendant's absence is exactly why we need protection orders, and that national law supersedes local customs when it comes to violence and bodily harm. The judge listens to both sides and asks questions about jurisdiction and evidence. I sit at the table next to Vivian, trying to follow the legal language but understanding maybe half of what they're saying. My hands are shaking, and my sister keeps writing notes asking if we're going to lose. After almost an hour of arguments, the judge denies the dismissal motion. He says our case raises serious questions about human rights and traditional practices, and he's granting temporary restraining orders while ordering a full investigation into what's happening in our village. The orders prohibit the elder, his son, and the mayor from coming within 500 meters of us or contacting us in any way. Vivian squeezes my hand under the table, and I feel something small shift inside me. Maybe the legal system can actually work for people like us. Maybe we're not completely powerless. Over the next 2 days, other women start sending statements to Vivian's office. Some are anonymous, just typed pages with no names attached. Others include photos of scars on tongues or missing fingers or burn marks. One woman sends a video of herself trying to speak with half her tongue gone, explaining what happened to her when she was 16. Another woman writes about watching her mother lose her tongue, and then years later losing her own. The statements come from different villages, but they all describe the same basic system where men decide if women are lying and punish them without trials or evidence. Together, they build a picture that shows this isn't rare or isolated. It's systematic abuse that's been happening for generations, while everyone pretends it's just culture or tradition. The next morning, Vivian calls me at the shelter saying my uncle left a message on her office line overnight. She plays it for me over the phone, and I hear his voice, tired and rough like he hasn't slept in days. He says he wants to apologize for holding my arms that day, that he knew I never stole anything, and he should have stood up for me. He says he'll testify about what happened if Vivian can guarantee the village won't come after him for speaking against the elder and the mayor. His voice cracks when he talks about watching them prepare the blade and knowing it was wrong but being too scared to stop it. I feel angry at him for his earlier weakness and relieved that he's willing to help now, and I don't know which feeling is stronger. Vivian tells me she can arrange protective measures for him if his testimony is solid, and I say yes because we need every witness we can get, even if I'm still mad at him for what he did. That same afternoon, Ren calls Vivian with something big. She's been digging through public records at the market office and found financial documents showing the mayor's wife has been skimming money from vendors for months. The rice she accused me of stealing was part of a bigger scheme where she used altered scales to cheat customers and pocket the difference. Ren found witness statements from 3 other vendors who saw her taking extra rice and produce, but were too scared to report it because of who she was. The statements are dated from weeks before she accused me, which proves she was already stealing when she blamed me for her own crime. Vivian adds these records to our case file and says this changes everything, because now we can show the false accusation was meant to cover up the mayor's wife's theft pattern. 2 days later, police get a warrant to search the mayor's wife's market stall based on Ren's evidence. I'm not there to see it, but Vivian tells me they found altered scales with weights that had been filed down to show less than the actual amount. They also found a notebook where the mayor's wife kept records of how much she skimmed from different vendors each week, including the 2 kilograms of rice she claimed I stole. The police document everything carefully with photos and evidence bags, making sure the chain of custody is perfect, so nothing can be challenged in court. Vivian meets with the officers to add this physical evidence to our case, explaining how it proves my accusation was false and was designed to hide the mayor's wife's own criminal activity. She says the altered scales alone are enough to show a pattern of theft that makes the wife's accusation against me completely unreliable. The provincial prosecutor reviews all the evidence and decides to file formal charges. Vivian calls me to her office to explain what's happening. The charges against the elder's son are attempted assault with intent to maim, which carries a penalty of 5 to 10 years in prison if he's convicted. The charges against the mayor are conspiracy and obstruction of justice for enabling his wife's false accusations and trying to use village customs to cover up her crimes. Vivian says these are serious charges that could mean prison time for both of them, not just fines or community service. She walks me through what each charge means and what the prosecution will need to prove, and for the first time, I start to believe that maybe the legal system can actually hold powerful people accountable for what they did to us. The arrests start the next day. The mayor gets detained at the provincial government building where he went to lobby against our case, and police officers walk him out in handcuffs while other officials watch. Vivian sends me a text with the news, and I feel something loosen in my chest that's been tight since the day I ran. Police also go to the elder's home with a warrant and seize the heated blade as evidence, photographing the scorch marks on our kitchen floor where it fell. The elder's son isn't there when they arrive, and neighbors say he left the village 2 days ago. Police issue a warrant for his arrest and add him to a regional database, but Vivian warns me he might stay hidden for a while since he knows what's coming. That same week, my mother contacts Vivian through a secure number and says she wants to leave the village with our youngest sibling. Vivian arranges for them to relocate to the city through a safe house program that helps families escaping dangerous situations. When they arrive, Vivian brings them to meet us at a neutral location, a community center with private rooms. My mother sees me and my sister and immediately breaks down crying, grabbing both of us and saying she's sorry over and over. She says she should have gotten us out years ago before my sister lost her tongue, that she knew the customs were wrong but was too scared to fight back. She holds my sister's scarred hands and apologizes for not protecting her when she was 15. My sister writes on her notepad that it's okay, that we're all here now, and that's what matters. Our youngest sibling stays quiet through the reunion, looking confused and scared by everything that's happened. We spend 2 hours together before the safe house staff say it's time to go, and my mother promises she'll testify if Vivian needs her to. 3 weeks after the arrests, the formal testimony hearing gets scheduled at the provincial courthouse. Vivian prepares us carefully, going over every detail of what happened, and making sure our stories match because they're true. The hearing day arrives, and we enter through a side door to avoid any village supporters who might be watching. The courtroom has a privacy screen set up that hides us from the audience while we testify, though we can see the judge and lawyers. My sister goes first, writing her testimony on a tablet that gets projected on a screen for everyone to read. She describes watching the married man follow her when she was 15, being accused of encouraging him when she was rejected him, and then having her tongue cut out in our kitchen while I hid under the stairs. The defense lawyer tries to challenge her timeline, asking how she can be sure of dates from 5 years ago. But Vivian has prepared medical records from the village clinic that show my sister was treated for severe mouth trauma on the exact date she described. Then it's my turn, and I tell the whole story from the rice accusation to the blade being heated to my sister saving me at the last second. The defense lawyer pushes hard on why I didn't report the mayor's wife's theft earlier if I knew about it, and I explain that nobody reports powerful people in the village because reporting means punishment. Vivian backs me up with testimony from other vendors who saw the same pattern but stayed silent out of fear. The defense challenges Tunde's written statement, arguing it's unreliable since he won't appear in person to be cross-examined. The lawyer suggests Tunde might have made up his story to help us, that there's no way to verify he actually picked us up that night, or that we were really running from the village. Vivienne signals to Ren, who's sitting in the gallery, and Ren brings forward a folder of documents. She's pulled highway toll records showing Tunda's truck passing through the checkpoint near our village at the exact time he said he picked us up. She also has truck weigh station timestamps from later that night showing his truck was heavier than usual, consistent with carrying extra passengers hidden under the tarp. The defense lawyer tries to argue this is circumstantial, but the judge seems impressed by how thoroughly the timeline has been documented. Ren's evidence turns Tunda's affidavit from a questionable statement into a corroborated account that matches all the physical evidence. Wei testifies next, and his medical documentation becomes the strongest part of our case. He describes examining my sister's tongue scars in clear, objective language, explaining how the scar tissue pattern is consistent with a heated blade injury that happened years ago. He shows photos of the scarring and explains why it couldn't have been caused by accident or disease. Then he presents his findings about my injuries from the day we escaped, including the infected foot and the jaw bruising where the elder's son grabbed my face. His testimony is calm and factual, just describing what he observed and documented without any emotional language. The judge asks several questions about his methodology and seems satisfied with Wei's answers. The defense tries to suggest my injuries could have happened some other way, but Wei has detailed photos with timestamps that prove when and how each injury occurred. His documentation makes our story undeniable because it's not just our word anymore. It's physical evidence that can't be explained away. After 2 days of testimony, the judge reviews all the evidence and makes his ruling. He grants permanent protection orders prohibiting the elder, his son, and the mayor from any contact with me, my sister, or any member of our family. The orders include a 500-meter distance requirement and ban any communication, whether direct or through third parties. He sets trial dates for the criminal charges against the elder's son and the mayor, scheduling them for 3 months out to give both sides time to prepare. Then he addresses the bail question and denies it for the mayor, ruling that his position of power in the village makes him a flight risk and a potential threat to witnesses. The mayor will stay in custody until trial. Vivienne squeezes my hand under the table when the judge announces the bail denial, and I feel something like safety for the first time since this whole thing started. The protection orders are real and enforceable, and knowing the mayor can't come after us while he's locked up makes me believe we might actually be safe now. The shelter staff connects me with a job opening 2 days after the court hearing. A fruit wholesaler needs someone for inventory tracking and customer orders, and the work pays enough that I could save toward rent if I'm careful. The interview happens in a warehouse that smells like citrus and earth, reminding me of my uncle's stand but without the fear attached to those memories. The owner asks basic questions about my experience weighing produce and dealing with customers, and I answer honestly about working at the fruit stand before everything happened. He nods and says I can start Monday morning at 6, then shows me the inventory system on a tablet that tracks everything digitally instead of on paper. My sister enrolls in an assistive technology course at a community center that same week. The program teaches communication methods for people who can't speak, covering everything from basic sign language to apps that convert typed text into spoken words. She comes back from the first session with information about devices that could give her more independence, and I see hope in her eyes that wasn't there before. The course meets twice a week and costs nothing because it's funded by a disability services grant. My mother starts attending counseling sessions at a different community center across town. She goes every Thursday afternoon and doesn't talk much about what happens there, but she seems a little less tense each week. She finds work at a laundry service that operates out of a basement near our shelter, folding clothes and running pressing machines for hotels and restaurants. The owner doesn't ask questions about her background or require references, just watches her work for an hour and then offers her the job. Our youngest sibling enrolls in a city school where nobody knows about our village or our family history. The teachers treat them like any other kid, and they come home talking about math class and playground games instead of living in constant fear. Watching them just be normal feels like the best thing that's come out of leaving. The provincial government sends oversight officials to our village 3 weeks after the court hearing. They arrive with police escorts and legal authority to replace the entire village council. The new administrators post a formal decree in the marketplace condemning the tongue-cutting practice in language that leaves no room for interpretation. The decree states that anyone who attempts the practice will face immediate arrest and prosecution under national law, with prison sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. Vivienne sends us photos of the posted notices, and seeing those words displayed where everyone can read them makes something loosen in my chest. Some villagers grumble that outsiders are destroying their traditions, and that the government has no right to interfere with local customs. Others stay quiet, but you can see the relief on their faces, especially the women who've been living in fear for years. An anonymous reporting system gets installed in the village during the same week the new administrators arrive. They set up a dedicated phone line that women can call without giving their names, and they install a lockbox outside the new administrative office where people can drop written reports without being seen. Within the first month, a dozen reports come in about various forms of violence and coercion that have nothing to do with tongue cutting, but show how deep the problems run. The reports describe forced marriages, stolen wages, beatings, and threats that kept women silent for years. Provincial investigators begin quietly following up on each report, interviewing witnesses and building cases. Vivian tells us about the reporting numbers during one of our check-in meetings, and knowing that other women are finally speaking up feels like something is actually changing. Ren publishes her third article focusing on the recovery process and policy outcomes rather than the trauma itself. She interviews legal experts about what systemic changes are needed and talks to social workers about how survivors rebuild their lives after escaping traditional violence. The piece mentions our case only briefly as one example among many, which feels like being seen without being consumed by public attention. She includes quotes from provincial officials about the new oversight measures and from NGO workers about similar interventions in other regions. Reading the article feels different from the earlier ones because it's not about our pain anymore. It's about what comes next and how to prevent this from happening to others. The mayor's wife issues a public statement through her lawyer 2 months after the protection orders get granted. The statement formally retracts her accusation against me and admits she took the extra rice herself to cover a gambling debt she'd been hiding from her husband. She offers financial restitution for the harm caused, suggesting an amount that Vivian immediately says is too low. Vivian negotiates back and forth with the lawyer over email and phone calls, pushing for enough money to cover our medical bills and contribute toward our housing deposit. They settle on an amount that's 3 times the original offer, paid in 2 installments with the first one arriving within a week. The money gets deposited into an account Vivian helped us open, and seeing that balance makes the idea of our own apartment feel real instead of impossible. The mayor accepts a plea agreement 3 months after his arrest. The terms require him to resign from the office permanently and accept a lifetime ban from holding any government position. He pays substantial fines that get split between the provincial treasury and a victim services fund, and he has to perform 200 hours of community service at a women's shelter in the city. It's not perfect justice because he doesn't go to prison, but Vivian explains that most victims of village customs never see any accountability at all. She says this outcome sends a message to other village leaders that enabling these practices carries real consequences. I think about whether it's enough and decide that watching him lose everything he valued counts for something, even if it doesn't undo what almost happened to us. The elder's son gets arrested after starting a bar fight in a neighboring town 4 months after we escaped. He punches someone over a card game dispute and the police get called. When they run his identification at the station, the outstanding warrant from our case pops up in the system. The officers execute the warrant immediately, and this time he's held without bail because he's already shown he'll run. Vivian calls to tell us the news, and I feel my shoulders drop with relief I didn't know I was carrying. Knowing he's in custody and can't come looking for us helps me sleep a little better at night, though the nightmares still come sometimes. My sister and I move into a small 2-bedroom apartment through a housing assistance program 5 months after arriving in the city. The program subsidizes part of our rent for the first year, while we build up savings and job stability. We spend a weekend furnishing it with secondhand basics from charity shops, finding a couch that's only slightly worn and a kitchen table with mismatched chairs that work fine. We buy our own locks for the doors and windows, the kind that need keys from both sides so nobody can break the glass and reach through. Having a space that's truly ours, with locks we control and neighbors who don't know our history, feels like the most valuable thing we've ever owned. My sister hangs curtains in her room, and I set up a small desk where I can do inventory paperwork from my job. I start keeping nightly voice memos on a cheap phone Vivian helped us get through a donated phone program. Every night before bed, I record my thoughts and experiences, talking through what happened during the day and how I'm processing everything that brought us here. The recordings are just for me, a way to reclaim my voice and prove to myself that I can speak without fear now. Some nights I talk for 2 minutes, other nights for 20, depending on what's weighing on my mind. I block harassing numbers when they appear, usually from area codes near our old village, and I don't let them stop me from using the phone. Slowly, my sleep improves as the nightmares become less frequent, dropping from every night to maybe twice a week, then once a week, then occasional. 4 months after our escape, we set up our small apartment for dinner with the people who helped us get here. My sister wipes down our secondhand table while I arrange mismatched plates and cups we bought from the charity shop. Tunde arrives first carrying a crate of fresh mangoes and oranges from his delivery routes, setting them on our kitchen counter with a smile. Wei shows up next with a bag full of bandages, antiseptic, and basic medical supplies for our first aid kit, explaining we should always keep these things on hand. Vivian walks in holding a folder of papers, and when she opens it, I see official stamps and signatures on documents that say, "Our case is officially closed," and the protection orders are permanent. Ren brings her published articles printed and bound in a simple folder, 3 pieces that told our story without exposing us, focusing on policy changes instead of our trauma. We crowd around our small table, passing plates of rice and vegetables, and Tunde raises his cup of water. We all lift our drinks and toast to boring, ordinary days ahead, to the simple freedom of speaking without fear, to sleeping through the night without nightmares. The conversation stays light, and we laugh about small things like Wei's terrible parking and Vivian's coffee addiction, normal topics that have nothing to do with villages or blades or running. After everyone leaves, my sister and I wash the dishes together in our tiny kitchen, and the quiet feels comfortable instead of scary. I wake up each morning now in a place where no one is sharpening blades in the kitchen, and that quiet relief is enough. My sister and I go to our jobs, come home, cook dinner together, and plan for things like saving money for better furniture, or maybe taking a class at the community center. It's not a fairy tale ending with everything perfect and tied up neatly. I still have bad dreams sometimes, and my sister's scars still ache when the weather changes. But this life is ours, and we built it ourselves. And knowing we're safe here makes even the hard days feel possible. We don't have profound insights about justice or healing, just the daily routine of living without fear. And that turns out to be enough. Congrats on making it to the end without throwing your phone. Reward yourself by subscribing and letting the algorithm enable us again.